Hello to our IAMPRO community. First of all, excuse my blue mouth. Huge apologies. It's a sweet earlier, basically. Welcome to our Q&A. This week, we have the wonderful John Bradley, and this is where I try and extract all their deepest, darkest secrets about their acting craft, a little bit about how they got into the industry and any acting tips they might have. So, without further ado, the man whose first job out of drama school, I believe, was quite a big one, I'm going to bring Mr. John Bradley in with me. Hi.
How's it going, Charlie? Nice to speak to you.
So nice to speak to you. So lovely to have you. Thank you.
Thank you. And also thanks for everything that you're doing on this platform. It sounds like a really, really important and really useful tool for people, and hopefully it'll change the landscape and open a few doors that have been needed to open for a long time. So thank you so much for all the work you're doing. It's so good.
Oh, amazing. No, thank you. You know, it's we're trying, and we try and offer as much as we can, and I feel really proud of it. So having brilliant people on like you only helps. Only helps.
Oh.
Can you take it? Oh, first of all, I want to know. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning, if that's okay. Your drama school experience. I believe you went to Manchester Theatre School, that was formerly known as Manchester Met.
Oh, do you know what? I never quite know what to call it. I think it's known as Manchester School of Theatre now. I was there, it was Manchester Metropolitan University, and it used to be Manchester Polytechnic. So it's been known by many things over the years, but that's the one, yeah.
I remember going to see it myself when I was 17, drive it. It's my first trip after I passed my driving test on the motorway in a little Austin Maestro.
Oh, right.
How was your experience there? Can you talk us through it? And before we go in, actually, sorry, to the drama school experience, what made you get into acting in the first place, John? Like, did you have a drama teacher at school, or?
It was, I come from a very sort of non-theatrical family, and a sort of a non-industry family. And when I was a kid, we didn't go to the theatre at all. We didn't even really watch that many films. And to be honest, we didn't watch that much drama either. It was all comedy. We just watched sitcoms and things like all through my childhood. And I think before I even knew what an actor was, I sort of knew I wanted to be one, because I'd watch people like, Rick Mail was my first hero.
Yeah.
My first favorite actor, and the person that really made me want to be an actor, because I remember watching him when I was a little kid and thinking, I don't know what he's doing, but I'd love to make people feel as happy as he's making me feel when I watch him. I just think it's such an important and quite intimate connection that you have with people that you'll never meet. If you can, make a career out of making people that you'll never get to meet, the vast majority of them, you'll never get to interact with them personally, but you make them happy. It feels like a very privileged position to be in. So that's what made me want to be an actor, and to be an entertainer before I wanted to be an actor. And I think as we will talk more, that instinct to entertain sort of stayed with me throughout an acting career that took me into some serious and heavy dramatic jobs, but the sort of want to entertain is still in there somewhere, I think. And with drama school, I had no idea that it was a thing. So adrift was I, and so without connection, and so without a blueprint. I didn't know the difference between drama school and stage school. I thought that whenever people said drama school, I thought it was something that little kids went to sort of learn how to be actors from a sort of young age. And it was only when I got to sixth form college that I started to meet people who also wanted to be actors. And they told me about it. They said, there's this thing called drama school where you go for 3 years and you get a degree in acting, and you just work on acting every single day. And I couldn't believe that it was a thing. It just felt like somebody had taken my dream environment from out of my imagination and made it real. And funnily enough, the person who gave me a sort of crash course in what a drama school was, then went on to be sort of in charge of the Mischief Theatre Company, the sort of play that goes wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, a wonderful lad called Jonathan, that we were together at sixth form, and he went on to do that, and I went on to do everything that I'm still trying to do. And yeah, it's just weird that without him, I wouldn't have even known that drama school was a thing. It's not like I didn't even think I could ever get there. I just didn't even know it existed.
And
So
they did,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly. So it was a big learning curve for me. That, and as soon as I got there, I just started having the best time of my life. I absolutely loved it. Just being with sort of, you know, like-minded people all day, every day. It's just such an amazing feeling, because when you go to college even and you study drama like I did at college, it's still only like a quarter of your time, and the rest of your time you have to do all the other stuff that they make you do there. I had to do English language, and I did law, and I did psychology, but it was just about getting to the drama quarter of my time there. Then suddenly drama school, you're with people who want to act, you're working on different plays, getting introduced to different playwrights and different practitioners every day. And it's just an absolute feast. And it was still the best time of my life, and probably the time of my life when I enjoyed acting the most. Because I think it's the last time, if you're lucky enough to go into working as an actor professionally, then it becomes your job. Then it becomes something you have to do to stay alive. Then the stakes are so much higher. There's so much money being spent on it. There's so much pressure. You get a different relationship with acting once you start working. But I think drama school is the time when you really, really enjoy it, when you discover it all, when you're mainly performing with your pals, you're performing for your pals, you're getting introduced to all these amazing plays. That's when you have the purest and most direct relationship with acting, I think.
Feels like a time where you're just completely free. And actually, and this is what I always think, because I didn't do the 3 years,
Right.
it's to really get to know yourself, like through
Totally.
and through what you do, you get to know who you are. It's a safe space to kind of voice opinions without. I went straight in at 17, you know, which is fine, and a great way to learn in itself, you know. But that's what I feel like I sort of missed out on the most.
Yeah, but I think I imagine that the drama school has got a lot better at this now since I left. But I remember having an amazing time there, but coming out and going straight into Game of Thrones, which is my first job out of drama school, not feeling particularly trained as an actor for camera. It was a very theatrically based, classical theatrical training. So we did lots of plays, we did lots of classics and lots of Shakespeare. We only did 3 hours of camera training in the 3 years that I was there.
Wow.
So it's a sort of thing where you come out of it trained to the hilt as an actor when it comes to understanding text and you know, understanding the poetry of it, and a lot to do with your body and your relationship with your own body. But in terms of acting for camera, I came out of it really with a lot of shortcomings in terms of not knowing what to do on a set and things like that. So it was a combination of being trained, but also learning on the job as well. So I'm sure that's got better. It sort of had to, really. But I remember coming out of it thinking that I wasn't completely trained for the job at hand.
And
Not
what
at
a job
all.
on.
Yeah, it was a funny one. That it was my first audition with my agent when I came out of drama school, and I wasn't even really thinking about getting it, because you just don't think that it works like that. When I went to that audition, I just wanted to do a good audition so that she'd feel justified in taking me on. It was more about communicating to her that I could do auditions rather than it was about thinking about getting this gig. And then I got it, and then it was the next decade of my life, and yeah, it was a lot of fun, obviously, first and foremost, but just a great training ground, getting to learn from not only other great actors and established actors, but having a crew that you learn from as well. And I think in terms of drama school, that's one thing that they didn't do when I was there, and I think is so important. Just have a couple of days where you learn what everybody on a crew does.
So true.
You know, if I've got a question about how big the shot is, if I've got a question about, if I've got a sound problem, if I've got who's the right person to turn to with any question that I may have. And I came out of that not necessarily knowing enough about that, and I hope that, and that just means that when you do go onto a set, you're a little bit shy and you're not particularly confident because it's all happening around you, but you feel on the outside of it, you don't feel connected to it. But I think if kids went into their first TV job knowing what everybody is and what everyone does, it just puts them right in the very center of it, and it feels like more of a team effort. It doesn't feel like the cast are over here and then the crew are over there doing their thing. It feels like it's all a big team effort, and I think that's something that would be a very important lesson, I think.
Yeah, agreed. And they all have funny names like seconds and grips, and even the camera shots and stuff like that. I don't know I think drama schools probably do more of that these days, but we try.
I think so, because you know the chances, because you do your third year shows and you're playing like Uncle Vanya when you're 19 or 20. The fact is, you're not going to play that for 30 years. The chances are your first job will be on camera now. The chances are your first job will be an episode of Emmerdale, or it'll be like a guest part or a walk-on part in a TV drama. And I just remember thinking, when I left drama school, I wasn't quite prepared for that world, and I hope that that's getting better, and I hope that the trainings evolve to become much more practically useful for the industry as it is at the moment.
Did you feel nurtured and looked after though when you started that job as a newcomer to the industry?
Do you mean by the people involved, or by the
crew? Yeah, did they sort of scoop you up and lead the way, like help you? Were you guided well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I really felt that everybody's working to make that shot, that scene, that episode of that show as good as it can possibly be. And I think that, I'm sort of like this anyway, but I sort of learned a lesson very quickly that making friends with a crew is the best thing that you can do, because they will look after you. They'll absolutely look after you. And you hear horror stories about people being combative with crews and making it awkward and causing trouble and things like that. And I just think that's so self-destructive, because if you do that, the crew won't care about you and they'll let you make mistakes. And I think if you make friends with them, they will be there for you. And that's something that's so important, that you are going to make mistakes, especially early on, and you're almost not expected to know everything. But if you create the right environment around you, and you make friends and you show a lot of respect for people, they'll show it back, and they'll tell you your mistakes and be constructive, but in the right way. And I think that kind of environment on Game of Thrones was hugely important to my development. And also what sort of helped as well was, even though it was a big show, I was still working with Kit Harington, who had done War Horse, and he'd done another play, but he'd not done much acting for camera either. And Amelia Clark was the same. They've gone on to such incredible careers now, but it was the first acting for camera of that level that they'd done either. So we all worked our way through it together, and we lent on each other for support, and we asked questions on behalf of each other, and we all learned how to be actors for camera all at the same time. And yeah, it was a unique mixture of experience and naivety, and there were so many different posts to lean on that. Yeah, it was the best camera training or set training that I could have hoped for.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more wholeheartedly about building the relationships with crew. It's so important, and it really will stand you in good stead. Was it single camera on Game of Thrones?
Most of the time we had a B cam, and sometimes we had a C cam as well, for if anything got tricky. But also, that was another thing that I just didn't have a single clue about when I got there. I didn't have a clue about turning around, and I didn't have a clue about how long it would take to. I've told this story before, but I looked at the first call sheet I ever got, and which I didn't know what I was looking at. Again, that's another thing that drama schools could maybe help out with. And they say, we've got one scene to shoot tomorrow, And I just said, oh, there's only one scene. I'll be free after lunch, probably. I just wondering what I was going to do with my afternoon. And then just the amount of time that it took to move these cameras, what felt like a matter of inches. It took like 45 minutes to change the camera from there to there. And you kind of think, what's the point? You know what I mean? Because you're just not in that world of editing and different shot sizes and moving in closer. And yeah, that was something that I learned on my first day as well, completely unprepared for. But you know, as you get into the rhythm of your working day, as you get more experienced, you learn things about, you know, don't blow all your energy and all your emotion on your wides, and learn about your lenses, and save the nuance and the energy of the emotion for when the camera's right there. All that stuff wasn't explained to me before I got there. It just filters through, and you just learn on the job, and experience lets you find those rules and find those decisions. But yeah, it was a high pressured first job to go into, but yeah, and you know, I always think it dribbles down from the top as well on any job, in terms of the atmosphere on set. If it's a tense set, if it's a slightly aggressive set, or if there's bad energy, I think that trickles down from the top. If your producers and your directors are like that, everybody on the crew will feel that.
Yeah.
Everybody just senses it. But because our producers, David Benioff and Dan Weiss and Bernie Caulfield and all our top brass, and HBO at the time, because when they were around, they had all the pressure of this show on their shoulders, but they were so calm and
Really?
so friendly and so welcoming, and just had such great personalities. Everybody on the crew felt relaxed as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important thing about how everybody fits into this puzzle. And if your keystones, if your key pieces have a certain energy, that's just going to infect everybody on the set, I think. But we were all very lucky with them, that they set the tone and made sure everybody had a brilliant time.
Going back to what you were saying about, if it's a wide, you don't want to give it your all. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that? Are you an actor who prefers to do it a few times and let it build, and you keep finding new things the more times you do it? Or generally, is it a one take thing? You like, let's get this on the first or second go? Because for me personally, I think sometimes I find things, the more we work super quickly, so there's no time for rehearsal, but find things more as we go, you know. But some people love it, you know, the instinct and that first take.
Yeah, well, that's one thing that it took me a while to stop beating myself up about as well. And it was relatively recently that I stopped trying to have this mythical holy grail in my mind of the perfect take. I always wanted 100% perfect take, where every single beat of it was perfect, and that was the only one that they'd use. And then you realize there's never just one take of anything used. They will take bits of most great performances that you've ever seen on camera are made in the edit. It's 50% on the set and 50% in the edit. And they'll take a second from your first take, they'll take 10 seconds from your second, and a little bit from your third, and a little bit from your fourth, to build this performance in the edit. So sometimes I do a great take that was 3/4 great, and then flagged a bit towards the end, and I beat myself up that, oh no, I've blown it. And then you think, no, and then you suddenly realize, oh no, I got a really good end to the scene on take 3 and a really good beginning on take 5. So it's just the more that you sort of let that understanding of how that editing process works, you become much freer to feel your instinct and to experiment, when you know that if it's no good, they just won't use it.
Trust in the director as well with that.
Exactly. Trusting the director, and just trusting that they're not going to make you look stupid. If you've done something that's not worked, the worst that can happen is that some of the crew might go to themselves, well, that wasn't
Yeah.
particularly good. But they'll never put anything that's really bad into the show. So there's a very limited amount of people will ever see that. So just try it.
So okay, that leads beautifully on to the next question, John. Do you throw curveballs in sometimes when you do takes? Do you do the unexpected, or is it something? Do you always discuss a choice with the director, or do you always offer something different?
I tend to lock it in quite early, actually. And I tend to, when the director gets us together for a blocking, I've got sort of 95% of it there and then in terms of the choices that I'd like to make and the rhythm of it. Because I've always not over prepared. I've always rigorously prepared the night before, usually in terms of figuring out what I want to achieve in a certain scene. Because I've always thought that people who don't prepare, I've worked with actors and they've always gone, oh, I'll just step in front of the camera and just see what happens. I won't prepare. I'll just see what happens. And I've always come away from that thinking, well, that just means you're trying to fluke it, really. And anyone can fluke it. If you've got 20 takes and you do every one of them differently, one of them will probably be okay. But it's a fluke. And I've never really trusted, I've never really had the confidence, and I've never really trusted in myself to be able to do that without a lot of prep. I just think when you go onto a set totally prepped, you know things inside out, you've made some kind of decisions that you have to discuss with the director, and they might be wrong, but prepare something just to let people know that you've been thinking about it. When you go onto a set prepared, it feels like you've got a suit of armor on, and it feels like you're standing on a very firm foundation. And I do agree that sometimes a moment of inspiration will strike you and it'll come from somewhere else, and it was something that you were not planning. But to just rely on that and to not do any groundwork, it seems like it's just too dangerous for me.
I think it would send me into deep fear.
Exactly. That's what it is. But also, it's seen like being the purest form of acting to just go on your instincts. But you're a bit like, well, I just think that's too much of a fluke.
And also, then they're not our instincts, are they? We're playing somebody else, so we have to have learned and know a detailed background, a version of what the character's instincts would be. And I don't know how naturally they come sometimes. Like I need to really think and plan and prepare like you, otherwise I would be in free fall. I mean, I've done it, I have to say. I've tried to wing it on occasion before, and it's not a comfortable experience.
No, it's really not. It's really not. But sometimes when it does happen, we've had those moments where suddenly just something takes you and you find yourself doing something that you hadn't planned on. When that works, it really is an exhilarating thing. But for that to be your the only tool that you have, I would find really scary. And that's also another thing, that it seems to be one piece of advice that I would give to anybody who was either about to study or about to go into work would be, the result is everything. And there's a kind of a thing at the moment where I'm getting a bit concerned every time I see it, where you hear actors interviewed and it feels almost as if what they're getting from it is more important than what an audience gets from it. And I find that to be quite dangerous, really, because there's this thing now about method has become one of the most overused and I think misused terms when it spoke about acting around, because people say stuff like, oh, this actor spoke in the accent for 3 weeks before they started shooting. That's amazing method. You think that's actually not method. That's not method at all. That's just practicing an accent. But the fact about that is that people want to get their method card, because you almost think method is the only way to do it. And if you're not doing method, you're not taking it seriously enough. And there are some extraordinary results happen as a result of method. Some extraordinary results happen as a result of not doing method. So it's all about finding a process that works for you, and always have the audience in mind, and try method, try what is prescribed as method. And if it doesn't work for you, don't think that you failed, and don't think that the work you do won't be good enough. It's just all about the result, and you get your results however you can. And I just part of me just thinks an audience don't really want to know how it's done. Really, it's almost as if when actors talk about their method, they're asking an audience to reevaluate the performance based on what they know about how hard they've worked. And I just think, whenever I hear that, I think as an audience, go, no, let me watch it. Let me watch it and let me decide if it's good or not. And if I don't think it is, no amount of finding out about how much you put into it is going to make that change. So I say that in a way to be reassuring, because I think a lot of actors, they hear about method and they think, oh, I don't do that, therefore I must be crap, or therefore I just mustn't take it seriously enough. And I'd like to tell people that's not the case. You can take it just as seriously, and you can get results that are just as good sometimes, just doing it your own way.
I love hearing that. I think there's a lot of comparing and comparison that does go on, and it can be a really dangerous place to be. Do you have a process? Do you talk about that, or do you want to keep that a mystery? A particular way that you approach a script from job to job?
Yeah, I think one thing that I always do, and it's not so much, it's partially a character thing, but it's also a story thing as well. Because I think as an actor, once again, you're not in service to yourself, you're in service to the story, and you're in service to the audience. So one thing that I do when it comes to a story thing is, when I get a script, I'll read it once and then I'll go back to the start again, and I'll mark off in the script every time my character changes. Every time there's every time their motivation or their course or their attitude or their opinion on something changes. And if it's a good enough script, that'll happen in every scene. Because no character ends a scene the way they started it, because you think, well, what's the point in seeing it then? What's the point in watching them in this moment if there's not some kind of change? So I mark off every single change. And then when you put your changes next to each other, you have your course throughout the entire film or play or story. And I think that's quite an important thing to do, especially when you're working in film and TV, where it's kind of disjointed and out of order. It's always good to know what my last change was and what my next change is going to be. So where I've come from and where I'm sort of going to. And I do that. And then I investigate more about the character, more about their relationship with themselves, relationships with other characters, relationship with the world. And then just keep building and building and building. And then usually the night before, when I learn my lines, because I only really learn them the night before, unless I've got a big complicated speech, I just like to keep them, and I'll drill them over and over again the night before. But I just don't like to have them in my mind for too long. Then it gets to the fun part of, how am I going to deliver it then? How am I going to say it? How am I going to say it in a way that's entertaining and that's interesting and makes an audience, when they watch it, go, oh, that's an interesting way of saying that. I wouldn't have expected him to say it like that in that moment. And finding ways to say lines that sound nice or sound pleasant or tickle an audience's ear in a certain way. But I think once you've got the cake, once you've built your sponge and you've iced it, these little kind of delivery decisions to make it interesting, that's like the decoration on top of the cake. And some people don't bother with that. Some people just keep it as the sort of, they keep it to the truth of it, and they keep it to the the sort of the uber naturalistic way of delivering a line that's the most obvious one. But I always, when I've got to that place, I always think, yeah, but is there something I can do to just color it a little bit, just add a little bit of texture to it, add a little bit of music to it, and just make an audience think, oh, that's an interesting choice. I think it just serves to make it a bit more watchable in a way, and
Mm.
a bit more unpredictable. And I've always liked actors that do that.
How much do you borrow from yourself? Or is it mainly invention when you are building a character?
Oh, I think borrowing from yourself is essential, really, because everything else is just guesswork. And I think that you can investigate and research other characters all you want, but you'll never know anybody as well as you know yourself. And I think it speaks to the sort of universality of great writing as well, that you should be able to see something that you connect with in every part that you read, even if it's extreme, even if it's extreme evil. There should be a key into that. Something in you will provide the key to that, and once you've got that, then you can start to build. But you have to find a bridge between you and them, and in order to do that, you have to start with a grain of something in common between you and them. And yeah, I mean, you know, I'd say that the great transformative actors, your Daniel Day-Lewis's and people like that, a part of that connection with it comes from something deep within themselves that they can latch onto this other person. There's a lot to be said about it. It seems to be a criticism of certain actors that they always play themselves, and I think as a criticism, it's a bit of a weak criticism, because A, they're not usually, but also B, even if you had to play yourself in a moment of extreme tragedy, in a moment of extreme stress, and find the emotion, even from within yourself, that's not an easy thing to do. So even if you are playing a character that's, quite often when people say they're playing themselves, it just usually means they've got the same accent as the person that they're playing, and they will take a different accent to be a different character. But it's not always. It's sort of deeper than that. For example, one of our greatest actors, probably one of the greatest living actors in the world at the moment, is Stephen Graham. Stephen Graham's a wonderful actor.
Yeah.
But Stephen Graham is great because he plays rage and different levels of suppression of his rage so perfectly. That's what he's a specialist in. He's a specialist in playing broken, angry, downtrodden men who have flashes of anger and are trying to keep their anger at bay all the time. You could say that Stephen Graham plays a lot of those beats all the time, and plays a lot of that energy all the time. But you're going to say that he's not one of the greatest actors around? Of course you're not, because he is. There's nothing wrong with being a specialist. And that's because I think Stephen Graham understands, as all good actors do, that sometimes a story is best served with a thing that you've done before. And it's not about you showing a different side of yourself all the time. It's about, what can I bring to this story? And it turns out what he can always bring to stories is his absolute refined expertise in playing characters like that.
Yeah.
And he takes a break from his ego. It's a bit like, Stephen Graham's never like, yeah, this part, it would suit it best to be a man who's got a lot of pressure, and his brows furrowed, and he's feeling this inner rage. But I think for me, I'm going to play it quite light and airy and quite comical. They'll go, no, Stephen, that's not good for the part. He knows what's best, and he knows what he does best, and that's why he's got to be one of the best actors around, because he's an expert. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having a product that you're an expert in, that you sell to whoever wants it.
No, it's so interesting to hear that, because sometimes actually going against what's written can have its moment, but just serving the words that are on the page and what the writer has written is
serving everything but your own ego.
So true.
I think that's something that actors should know, but I think it just seems like less and less of them are sort of got a mind on that, and it's more about what can I personally get out of it. And I just think that's never the right way to think about it.
And what about finding the physicality of a character? Is that something you think about and try and find before you walk onto a set? Is it something that comes when you put your costume on?
Yeah, it's usually it's usually I think I actually think it's another thing that comes from the weight of the words. It comes from the weight of the character and the sort of the amount of pressure and the amount of pain that character is feeling inside
Mm,
has a physical impact on their body. So if you take a character like I played in Game of Thrones, Samwell, he's a character that is so self-conscious and with no self-esteem and so painfully shy and broken by his upbringing and broken by his life up to that point. So he doesn't really have a physical life because it's almost as if the weight of the world is crushing him inwards.
mm,
And it feels like he's got something physically on his back that's restraining him psychologically, but also restraining him physically.
mm,
And he's not got the confidence to have a physical life and to demonstrate himself physically. And I've played other characters that have got a great deal of confidence and a great deal of energy to them. And when you inhabit a character like that, you can't help but open yourself out physically. It's like you open yourself out to the world and suddenly your expressions are bigger and they're more expansive and they're more expressive because that character's saying to the world, here I am.
mm,
I'm open to the world. And Sam was very closed off to the world, and other characters with more energy and more doing to them
mm.
are really open and much more bombastic and much more demonstrative physically. And I think that you almost find yourself doing that by accident. It's not something that you really sort of think about, but some people do, obviously the great physical performers do that. But I think if you're just playing an everyday person, the more you think about their internal energy and their relationship with themselves and their relationship with the world, the physicality just happens. And you find yourself making these gestures and you find yourself behaving physically in this way. And you catch yourself out sometimes. You go think, oh, I'm doing this physical thing. That must be because I'm connecting with it in a subconscious level, and that's coming out in the physicality. And
Yeah.
yeah, I've always found it interesting that something, you know, that's the nice thing about acting. Some things you decide on, and some things are sort of decided for you. And I
Yeah.
find that journey quite an interesting one to go on as well.
It's quite interesting that on stage when you come really comfortable in something, and that is my favorite place when I'm doing theatre, when I've got something firmly under my feet and that freedom to play and you're really in the character, and I actually take myself by surprise by something I'm doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Throws me when I'm on stage. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There was a scene that I did in Game of Thrones in season 5, I think. So it was the first time that he goes back to his family home, and we're sat around this table, and he had a very abusive father. And in the scene, the father's abusing him and just talking about how fat he is and talking about how useless he is. And you really want Sam to stand up and give him pelters back and stick up for himself, and he doesn't do that. But what I found myself doing was I found myself like, as he was talking to me, I found myself like twisting my fingers into like a weird shape like this.
Yeah.
Like just it was almost as if he was sort of becoming wizened and bent out of shape in as he was receiving that abuse. And then it occurred to me that what he's doing is he's creating physical pain
Oh.
to distract himself from the pain of this.
Yeah.
And that was something that I sort of did instinctively. And then you do things instinctively and then you reverse engineer it to find out why you're doing it.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting thing where you're being led by subconscious decisions.
Mm.
And that's a special place to get to. But I've been playing that character that by then for 5 years, which is a rarity and doesn't happen very often. But I'd reached that place then where I was being guided by been guided by just having so much knowledge and understanding of him. I don't know if you've heard this before. Actually, when I went to drama school, they said there are four stages of this training. The first stage, which you're at now, is that you're unconsciously incompetent. So you don't, at this moment now, you don't know how bad you are. Next stage is you're going to be consciously incompetent. So you're going to then know how bad you are. Then you're going to be consciously competent. So you know all the tricks and you know how to employ them and you know what to do. And then you're going to be unconsciously competent, which means you can just do it.
Right. I've never heard that.
It means you just do it and you don't have to think about the mechanics of it. It's just so deep in your body that your proficiency as an actor just becomes second nature. And you know, the first one is always very hard because, you know, you've come from doing school plays and plays at college and maybe amateur plays, and you're always usually the best thing in those plays because you're completely going off your instinct. And you're just trying to show off, basically. And sometimes you get results from doing that, but it's only when you get to drama school that you realize, oh, hang on a minute, there's more to this.
Yeah.
And as good as I thought I was when I was doing those plays, I've got a long way to go. And I think that's the point when people get to drama school, where I know it's the same for our course. More people dropped out after the first term than dropped out at any other time because they were just a bit like, oh, I thought I was great and I thought I could do it, but the road ahead seems so long that I don't know whether I can sort of hang in there. But the ones that did hang in there had an unbelievable experience.
But okay, so do you think with that is the danger of overthinking it all? And do you know, because for me, sometimes if I get into overthinking it all too much, I block. I feel blocked. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think it's some
drama school, so I just don't know if that is something that you might have experienced or not.
Yeah, I think that's a very common conversation in acting. Does it do you any good to just overanalyze absolutely everything? But I think of it in a way, it's just something that you have to get through. Like, it's like driving. It's like when you start driving, it comes into your mind like, oh, clutch down and then change gear and then lift up with the clutch, find a biting point and then drive off. Because so you have to overthink driving at first because you just don't have it in your body. And then when you've been driving for a few years, you're like, oh, I've driven here. Like driving happens so unconsciously that you're not concentrating on all of these different things. You're just instinctively doing it. And I think that's the jump off between consciously competent and unconsciously competent. The consciously competent part is the overthinking. Yeah. And then if you can get through that, when you don't have to think about it anymore, when it's just so much in your body that it's just a skill that you've acquired that you can just do purely on instinct, that's the sort of end goal. But you do have to go through quite a lot of tedious overthinking.
Well, you do the work and then you trust, don't you? You have to
exactly
work in and then just trust that it's all there.
Exactly. And also, I don't know about how you feel about this, but have you ever had an experience where, and it can work either way, either a director's told you that something was really good and you just don't feel it was.
Yep.
And otherwise, sometimes you can do something really great and people don't come over and tell you how good they thought it was. And you're a bit like, well, I thought that was really great. And nobody else seems to be telling me that it was really good, but I know that it was. And there's nothing more frustrating than that. There's nothing more frustrating than a director moving on to something else and being happy with what you've done, but you not quite being happy with it yourself. Is that something that you've experienced?
Oh my God, yeah, I a lot.
It's horrible, isn't it?
But that's where the trust has to come, that they've got it in the edit.
That's what I mean. Exactly. That's exactly what I mean. But like, I think that's something that I've learned lately as well, to trust them that they've got what they want and not going back to what I said before about no such thing as a perfect take, not chasing this very pure experience,
Yeah.
because that's when you have to get over yourselves a bit and just think, oh, an audience will never know. An audience will an audience will think that was really good, and it's sort of it's about surrendering your ego to
Totally.
being reminded that you're in service.
Yeah, absolutely. And tricky when if you're a perfectionist as well, to let go of that, you know.
Yeah, but then you can be a perfectionist all you want on the day, and then you watch it and they find they didn't even use the take that you thought was
Yeah.
perfect. It's about surrendering yourself, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And that's, you know, a lot of people can't do that. They can't do that. The surrender.
Yeah, but I think that's something, you know, that's one of the differences between stage and screen. I think that it does feel like a much. I mean, I've never done a play professionally. I'd love to, but we're talking about it at the moment. But the stage seems to be a place where perfectionism can happen and pure moments can happen, because there's no filter, there's no barrier, there's no technological barrier between you and the audience. They're experiencing what you're doing directly. And I think that I mean, that's why you get, you know, half an hour to rehearse for screen and 6 weeks to rehearse for a play, because you're trying to make it perfect. It doesn't matter if a take isn't perfect. It matters more if a whole theatrical show isn't perfect, because that's the only chance they'll get to see it.
Yeah.
So I think there's much more scope for perfectionism in theatre, I think, from what I sort of understand.
And for me as well, God, I've got so many questions I could talk to you for ages. But in theatre, I think as well, the ability to cancel and continue, because sometimes you'll throw yourself with something and go, shit, that was so bad. And then, you know, get in your own head about it. It's being able to let that go in that moment on that stage, cancel and continue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And just know that they won't know. How many times have you gone backstage to see, you've gone round after a play and you thought it was great and you've said to your mate, that was great, and they've gone, oh shit tonight, it was terrible tonight.
Every time.
Yeah, exactly. But
Every time I go meet a friend that's an actor. Yeah.
Totally. But audiences loved it, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah. What is the best note? Yeah, just a couple more questions, John, before we depart. What's the best note you've ever had? Is there one that springs to mind from a director?
Yeah, some notes. Ah, well, there's two. Okay, there's two really quickly. I remember doing something quite early on, and the director came over to. I had to pretend that I was in pain of some sort, and I was feeling it in my body, and I was feeling it on my face, and I was really trying to get into this place of pain. And the director comes over and says, "That was good. This time, can you just touch your neck like this?" And I went, I can do, but it doesn't feel like an instinct. It feels like a gesture. It feels fake, really, to touch my neck. And he says, yeah, but if you don't touch your neck, it's not reading.
Right.
It's not reading that you're in pain. And I need a physical thing to communicate to the audience that you're in pain. And I was a bit like, yeah, that's an important note, actually, in terms of that thing that I'm talking about. As long as the audience have to get it.
Yeah, yeah.
The audience have to get it, and then so I learned a lot from that. And then on a poetic note, we were doing a scene in Game of Thrones where I'm a broken character, and I fall in love with this other broken character, and we go on a sort of mutual healing process. It's a really quite beautiful story. And the director comes over and he says to us, "Here's how I see your two characters in this scene." It's a scene where we first meet. He says, you're both birds, and you've got one broken wing each. But together, you can't fly on your own. But together, you've got a perfect set of wings, which means you're able to fly.
I mean, that's
beautiful. It's an unbelievably poetic and beautiful note. And that we played that scene where we first met, and then we carried that note with us for the rest of our time together.
And it worked beautifully. I mean, I was such a huge fan. It was just...
Oh, thanks very much.
Yeah. Amazing. I read also that after you finished Game of Thrones, you really sat it out and waited. There were a lot of type roles that came your way that you turned down. Is that right?
Yeah. I just think that I needed a bit of a reset.
Right.
Really, I just needed to. To just cast it off and because I did other jobs while I was doing Game of Thrones, and I
Mm.
just found that character was sort of so ingrained in me that whenever I acted that
Right.
part essentially, and I acted that energy because I associated being in front of a camera with that persona. And certain little tricks that I did for Samwell came out in other parts where it wasn't necessarily always appropriate. So I just needed a bit of time to sort of flush it all out of me. And that was also that was also at a time where people weren't necessarily banging down the door to offer me stuff, especially to
Right.
offer me stuff that was different.
Mm.
And that came as a bit of a shock. And then I just thought, well, it's kind of over then, because that's all that people want from me, and they don't even, not necessarily loads of people want that either. So this could be the end of it. And then I got saved by by a very strange and wonderful place. Jennifer Lopez
Well,
came
this is what it's leading me on to. Yes, go
yeah.
on. Tell us.
She came to me, and her team sent a script to my agent and said they're doing this romantic comedy called Marry Me,
Mhm.
and they'd like to know if John would be interested in this part of her manager. And I was in that horrible cycle then of not being down because I didn't have any work, but also being so down that I didn't want to do auditions because I didn't want to fail at that audition, which means that it'd make me feel even worse. So I just said, well, I'm not sure if I can bear to audition for anything at the moment. They said, no, it's an offer. She wants you to do it, and they all want you to do it. And I was a bit like, I couldn't believe it, and I couldn't believe that not only was somebody like her offering me work, as incredible as she is, but also they wanted. I read the part. It was a sort of high energy, nervy sort of manager type who's got a high energy sort of neuroses to him, and it was so physically different from Sam. I was a bit like, yeah, of course I'd do it. I'd love to do it, but I don't know where she's seen that I can do it, where I can be
Mhm.
somebody that's this sort of charming and this sort of having this jittery sort of charming energy to them. I don't know where they've seen that I can do that. And they said, no, nothing to do with Game of Thrones. They saw you doing an interview with Ellen DeGeneres, and it was on that they saw that interview and said, oh, maybe you can do that part. So that was what was amazing about that. It was somebody who wanted me to do this job, not because of anything to do with Game of Thrones, because of
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
because of my own energy. It was the biggest compliment I've ever got. She saved my confidence a million
Yeah.
times over. And I'm grateful to a lot of people in my career, but I'm grateful to her for kind of opening the door to this second act, if you like. And she got on set with her, worked with her for 6 weeks. She was as incredible as you'd expect, had a brilliant time. The film's out at the moment. It's been out, came out Valentine's weekend, and it's just the start of a new thing. And
How
sometimes you just got to wait for somebody to
Yeah.
give you the chance, really.
Huge congratulations. Were you nervous around doing that? How do you handle your nerves?
Um, handling your nerves. I handle my nerves in a way that I think would make a lot of people more nervous. I
Go
handle
on.
mine. I handle my nerves by, when I think, oh God, this is gonna go wrong. I I just don't think I've got it in me to do this today.
Mm.
I just think it's going to go badly. Just to think of yourself, well, Jennifer Lopez and Elaine Goldsmith Thomas, her producer, and all the sort of execs and people in charge of this film, they think you can do it. And so if they think you can do it, no, to some people that'd be a bit like, oh, they think I can do it and I can't do it. That's going to make it even worse. But for me, it's just a bit like their faith in me sort of
Yeah.
gives me faith in myself. And I you know, I think that's the same. If anybody gives you a chance, just acknowledge your debt to them and just think, oh, they think I can do it, so let me do them a favor by justifying their decision and letting them know that they made the right choice. And yeah, it's just about, you know, sometimes you may not feel particularly great about yourself, and then you just think, well, other people think I'm all right, so let's just try and prove them right.
Well, I think you're more than all right. Thank
Oh,
you
thanks
so
very
much
much.
for your time. And I know you mentioned that you might be in loose discussions about a theatrical project. I, for one, will be at the front row coming to say, I'd love to see you tread the boards.
Oh, well, thanks so much. You'd be very, very welcome. That's the thing. I've not done a play since I left drama school, so it's a whole new set
Yeah,
of muscles to try and rediscover. But it'll be scary, but it's got to happen sometime. So hopefully, in the near future, fingers
yeah.
crossed.
Do you have any advice before we go for young people, not necessarily young, people early in their career looking to break into the industry?
You know, it's sort of what the sort of encapsulation of everything that I've said so far. It's just that it's just, you know, keep going.
Yeah,
Please keep going, because, you know, I've said this and it's so true. If you feel like giving up, if you feel like giving up on the Tuesday, what if something amazing would have happened on the Wednesday and you've missed it? You know, so much about this industry is about luck, and it's about timing, and they're casting a certain part when you're, you know, when you're available. You can only really, there's so much about that you can't control, but what you can control is being available when it happens,
yeah,
and being in there, and not giving up, and just trusting that something's going to happen, and just keeping working, and also keep trying to get better.
yeah,
When I watch the first season of Game of Thrones now, I think, oh God, I just wish I could do that all again. It's just so much. There's some good bits as well, but some of it I think, oh shit, just I don't really want to watch it. And then you think, no, that's how it should be. Because if you watch a performance of yourself from 12 years ago and you think that's as good as you've ever going to be, and you've not improved since then, you're doing something wrong. So
mm,
always take the time to get better, and never feel that you've really cracked it, because there's always so much to work out and find out about yourself.
yeah. And being resilient. John,
100%.
thank you so much. I honestly could keep talking to you for ages, but it's Saturday and I'm going to leave you to your day. So 1,000 thank yous for being here.
I had a brilliant time, Charlie. Thank you so much for having me on, and good luck to you, and good luck to everybody there.
Thanks, John. I hope I see you soon.
Fingers crossed. Thank you so much. Bye bye.